Welcome, Michael Lynton. And please welcome Arianna Huffington.
Welcome. Great. Thank you for having me. Hi, Arianna.
Hi, Michael. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me to do this. So I thought I would start with the obvious question. We've known each other now 10, 15 years. You've written a lot of books. You've had enormous success in so many different areas. What made you think to write this book now?
So first of all, I had promised myself and everyone who cared for me that I would not write another book. So this is a little bit a surprise baby I never thought I would have. It all started with a commencement address I gave last year at Smith. And having two daughters, one who recently graduated, one who's graduating this year, I take commencement speeches very seriously. I feel you have 15 minutes where you really have the graduating class attention, and you better say something meaningful. And so I decided to speak about my own wake-up call, now 7 years ago, when I collapsed from burnout, exhaustion, and sleep deprivation, hit my head on my desk, broke my cheekbone, got 4 stitches on my right eye.
Wow.
And it started me on this journey of asking myself a lot of the questions that we stop asking after we leave college, like what is a good life?
Right.
What is success? And I told the graduating class that while by conventional definitions of success I was successful, by any sane definition of success, if you are lying in a pool of blood on the floor of your office and nobody has shot you, you are not successful. So after the speech, it really must have struck a chord, because I had an amazing response, and a lot of publishers asked me to write a book, which I said no to for about 6 months, and then I decided it might be good to put it all together like a kind of roadmap from moving from what we know we should be doing to actually doing it.
Right. And so when you look at what you recommend in the book, and I want to talk about that in a moment, but in the broadest sense, when you talk about gratitude and meditation and things like that, and the mindset that you need to have to lead a good life, to what extent do you think that sort of lives in contradiction to what conventional wisdom would say drives people toward a successful life? And how can those two things sort of coexist?
Well, I think that's the key question, because it does live in contradiction at the moment.
Right.
Because right now, society has shrunken the definition of success down to these 2 metrics of money and power. And what I'm saying is that these 2 metrics are like trying to sit on a 2-legged stool.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, you're going to topple over. And more people are toppling over. And that we need the 3rd leg of the stool, the 3rd metric, which consists of 4 pillars. The first one is our own well-being. It is absolutely stunning, if you think of it, how many people sacrifice their own health and well-being on the altar of success because of this collective delusion that the only way to succeed is through burnout, which is now completely disproven by modern science. Then wisdom. You look around and you see so many leaders in politics, in media, in business, very smart, high IQs, great degrees, making terrible decisions. It's not, it's not that they're not smart, but they're not wise. So we've become really disconnected from our own inner wisdom. The third is wonder. I feel that I want to kind of bring joy back into our daily lives. It's not enough to just be effective and have results, but to actually not miss the moment. And finally, giving. Again, one of the great moments, one of the reasons why this is a great moment is that modern science is validating ancient wisdom, including about giving, which truly has been proven out to be a shortcut to happiness. So when we integrate these elements into how we lead our lives, even when we do exactly the same thing we are doing right now, it's transformed.
Got it. So, you know, a lot of people, I'm sure in this audience, but I know in the world, buy books to improve their lives, and those books can include everything from exercise to how you lead your life. And then you put the book down, you try it for a week, your life is a little better after 7 days, and boom, something hits you on a Monday and you're right back where you started from.
Yes.
How sustainable do you think what it is you're suggesting in the book is? Because everything you sort of posit rings very true, but I'm curious that the minute somebody starts yelling at you in the office or worse at home, which is the case with me, I have 3 teenage daughters, so home life is a little more stressful than work life. You know, you go tumbling back to old habits.
First of all, you said something important. Here you are, you run a huge company, but what happens at home is more stressful than what happens at work because...
By a big measure.
Yeah, because of the way it affects us emotionally. Now, you're pretty rare in the way that you don't let the stresses of work, and I'm sure you have thousands in the course of a day, really take you off course. I think that's like a very important point, because for most people right now, everything that happens becomes a cause for disturbance.
Right.
So let's start with that. Let's start with how many things do we allow to disturb us. And that's why I quote a lot of Stoic philosophers.
Right.
Who basically say that the ultimate freedom given to human beings is the freedom to choose our own attitude.
Yeah.
And that's why I even quote people who wrote after their experience in concentration camps. You know, even in the most extreme circumstances, there were people who were able to connect with that source of strength, peace, and wisdom in them, and transcend their circumstances. And that's like a very important point for us to remember. Marcus Aurelius, who after all had a pretty big job as emperor of Rome, but was also a Stoic philosopher, would retire every night and write in this book that became Meditations about what he called his inner citadel. And how do we return to that place? So, first of all, if we can reduce the amount of things that disturb us, and then for the things that disturb us, Marcus Aurelius' advice is to see the hidden blessing in it. That if life is a giant classroom, everything that happens, every hardship, every heartbreak has a hidden blessing. And I felt that, 2 years ago, after I had started practicing these things that I write about in the book, I got the call that every parent dreads, my daughter saying, "Mommy, I can't breathe." She was, 2 months away from graduating. And, that drive from New York to New Haven, where I picked her up in the emergency room, was like one of those sort of agonizing times. But even then, I put into practice what I had been working on, starting with feeling grateful. Feeling grateful that she was alive. Feeling grateful that she had reached out for help and that she wanted to get well. Feeling grateful that she had a loving family to rally around her. And as we went through a recovery, and she's been sober now for over 2 years, I also felt grateful that this happened at a time when I was around and able to help, because clearly when somebody gets involved in drugs, it's because of a lot of deeper issues that they haven't dealt with.
Yeah.
So I'm using this as an example of how even in the situations that touch us most deeply, we have an opportunity and a way to see what is the lesson here, and therefore to use them to evolve and to go deeper. And also one other thing, Michael, that I feel is very important is that there is a sort of global shift happening. So that when people begin on this journey, they do have the wind on their back, because there are many more people and many more companies that are beginning to put these things into practice. So it's very different even than what it was like a couple of years ago.
One of the things that rang most true to me in the book was this sense of gratitude and being grateful, because I am a big believer in that. And I have a couple of questions around that, because how one gets oneself to the place where one can feel grateful, one can feel gratitude, is not always that easy. And the way that I seem to have gotten there, and I'm curious about what your experience is I'm a big believer in luck. And once you sort of say luck plays an enormous component in one's life, the hand you're dealt is something you can be grateful for. I'm curious whether that's something that resonates with you and whether you put that as part of what you believe in.
I also believe that there is a kind of blueprint to our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe there are no accidents. So by which I mean that when I look back at my life, I worked very hard. It's not like I don't work hard.
No, you work really hard. That I can attest to.
But some of the best things that happened in my life, I did not make happen.
Right.
And sometimes we forget that. We think we make everything happen. Even though everybody can look back at their lives and look at things and say, I didn't make that happen. I became a writer by accident because an English publisher saw me debate at the Cambridge Union and invited me to write a book. I was ready to go to the Kennedy School of Government to do a postgraduate degree. Instead, I was offered a book contract at 22, something I couldn't really turn down, and I became a writer. And then I wrote my second book, and it was rejected by 36 publishers. And I thought, hey, the first book was clearly a fluke, and I should do something else. And I ran out of money, and I was walking down St. James's Street in London when I was living at the time. I saw Barclays Bank, and I walked in, armed with nothing but a lot of Greek chutzpah, and I asked to see the bank manager, and I asked for a loan, and he gave it to me.
You were in a good neighborhood.
And I still sent him a holiday card, Mr. Ian Bell, the Barclays Bank manager. And it made me feel that, like in fairy tales, you have the hero or the heroine lost in a dark forest, and then you have these helpful animals that come out to help them. Well, in life, too, there are helpful animals disguised as human beings, as bank managers, whatever, who are there to bring us luck. I mean, that's the kind of thing that's luck.
Absolutely.
But I think it's also a really profound truth about life.
Right.
And when we connect with that, life has a certain mystery to it. I think one of the ways to make feeling grateful and feeling lucky easier is to connect with the mystery of life. Otherwise, when we reduce life to our to-do list and our next project, it becomes very prosaic.
Right.
And when we lose the poetry, it's harder to tap into the gratitude.
Right. Don't you think, and I always find that luck, or having the view that luck plays such a large role in it, is helpful in this, that the more and more that people either to work hard to get into the right school or get the right job, that there's this feeling of entitlement, and that once that lodges itself in your brain, that you get angry and upset when things don't go the way you want them to. And what resonated for me in the book, although it's not articulated this way, is that there's never a feeling of entitlement in the book. There's always a feeling of things come as they may, as you're describing them.
And that was very much the way my mother brought up, my sister Agapi Stasinopoulos, who's here, and me. We grew up with no money in a one-room apartment in Athens, but she always made us feel that we were bigger than our circumstances.
Right.
And that we were not defined by our circumstances.
Right.
And she always was able to bring magic into our lives.
So can you describe a circumstance where your mother just did that on a day?
Well, so our favorite thing on our birthdays was to go to 2 movies and a play.
In one day?
In one day. Okay. We didn't want a birthday party or anything. We would go to one movie after another and then a play.
Right.
So I remember on one of my birthdays, I don't know, I was 11, we were getting ready to leave the apartment and we're super excited. And then we got out of the apartment and she realized she had forgotten the keys. Now, every other mother, I think, or not every other mother, but most other mothers would have said, oh my God, this is terrible, we can't go to the movies, right? We have to
I got to call the locksmith.
We have to call a locksmith, we have
Absolutely.
to see how we're going to get back. My mother
Right.
said, not to worry, let's go to the movies and the play and we'll figure it out. And then we got back late. We were living pretty close to a fire station. She went in, she asked them, she made friends with everybody. And the fire station chief personally put a ladder up and got up to the window and opened the window and got us in. And that was just...
Was he friendly with the bank manager? He was the bank manager.
He was the bank manager. Yes,
it's all the same
he had
person.
many parts, yes.
They just pop up in your life.
And in yours.
Right.
Can you tell us an example where luck...
Oh, countless examples of where luck has... the way I met my wife the first time, because I met her twice. So I know it was destiny. We were at a play, and there was a guy, there was one person in the play who was sitting in an electric chair for 45 minutes giving a monologue. It was a terrible play. There were 60 people in the audience. And I figured nobody would be in this play, nobody would be watching this play unless they knew that guy. Because who in their right mind? And I saw this woman sitting on the other side of the aisle. And so I thought to myself as she left and it was raining and she jumped in a cab, it's not 6 degrees of separation. It can, at this play, only be 1 degree of separation. So I get in the cab and I try and make conversation with my future wife. And she, of course, thinks I'm out of my mind. And she won't have anything to do with me and gets out the next block. And I go back to my house, where I'm sharing a house with a couple of people, who, sure enough, they know Jamie. And they say, oh, I'll call her up and tell them you're not a lunatic. And it was luck. It was just good luck. So I'm a big believer in luck. I think that luck really gives me a good gratitude. It's helped me out. But let me ask you another question, because this is the one that I find very tricky, and I'm sure others do too, is how do you put yourself in that frame of mind, particularly when you're not in it? You know, sometimes you sort of have to fake it to make it.
Yes.
You know, Shakespeare said of Prince Hal, we become the mask we wear.
Yes.
And sometimes, in my opinion, we have to figure out what mask we're going to wear, and at a certain point it becomes our attitude or becomes our personality. Do you find that to be the case?
I do. And I find that what helps me a lot is to surround myself with words. You know, you and I both love books and words. They mean a lot. I know they transform me. So I have certain rituals. So rituals, which include words and books, a little tribe of people with whom you can have conversations that help you course correct. And also, what makes it easier is that I really deeply believe now what Rumi said, that I quote in the book, which is live life as though everything is rigged in your favor.
Yeah.
So no matter what happens, however it may appear...
It's certainly better than the other way around.
Exactly. Speaking of faking it until you make it, I mean, think of all the people we know who live life as though the universe is against them. Mm-hmm. So the slightest thing that happens, they take personally.
Right.
And they they feel that it reflects on them. And then, of course, there is that voice in our head, you know, that I call the obnoxious roommate living in my head, the voice of self-doubt, the voice that puts us down, the voice that judges us. And that voice, for me, is even more draining than anything we may be doing. So dealing with that voice, having certain rituals, like I'm a big believer, and you and I have talked about that, in having a little transition between my day life and my sleep life.
Right.
Even if it's like a 10, 15-minute transition. For me, it includes having a hot bath. My bedroom is a device-free zone.
Good idea.
So by my bed, I only have real books.
Right. Good idea.
And reading something before I go to sleep, which has nothing to do with work, you know, which is philosophy or spiritual teachings or poetry. And that, I think, little by little, it's become easier to just get back to that place.
Right, right. So it does take a little bit of practice to get there. You can't just do it on its own.
Yes, because the world sends us incessant signals to just stay on track for the two metrics. You know, to keep climbing, to keep achieving. And I have nothing against achievement, accomplishment, hard work, any of these things. It's just that when they become everything.
Right. It's tough to shut out the world. It really is.
It's very tough. And I have a quote in the book that I love by Ian Thomas, who writes that every day the world will grab you by the hand.
Right.
And tell you, this is important, and this is important, and this is important. You must worry about this, and you must worry about that, and you must worry about the other. And you must yank your hand back and put it on your heart and say, no, this is important. And that takes discipline.
Yeah.
But perfect discipline is the perfect freedom. And the more disciplined I become, the easier it becomes to get back to that center. Instead, like here we are in this church. Every religion, whether Christianity, Judaism, Islam, has basically, in different words, talked about that center in each human being. You know, the Bible calls it the kingdom of God is within, but if you don't want to quote religion, you can quote science. You know, Archimedes said, give me a place to stand and I can move the world. So most of the time we don't live in that place, but when we have tasted it, then we know we can get back to it. And for me, life is how quickly can we get back to it, and how many times a day do we get back to it?
Yeah, not easy. And you have to get away from the devices.
You have to get away from the devices. And so that is really the kind of paradox of our age. That hyperconnectivity has made it harder to connect with ourselves.
Yeah.
That we have become addicted to our devices. We have become addicted to being perpetually distracted.
I got the extreme version of it with my mother recently, who's 84, and I went to go and visit her. She lives just outside of New York, and she doesn't have an answering machine. She lives by herself in a house, and I was seeing her about a month ago, and we were sitting there and having a conversation, and the phone rang. And she didn't answer it, and I said, shall I go and answer it? And she said, no, don't go answer it. And I said, well, are you going to go and answer it? And she said, no, I'm not going to answer it, I'm busy. And I said, what are you busy with? She said, I'm talking to you. And I said, I know, Mom, but you don't have an answering machine and the phone is ringing. And she said, if it's really important, they'll call back.
Ah, wow.
And it was, you know, she doesn't have a device and she doesn't use email. And the fact that she didn't even pick up the phone when I was visiting said to me, boy, now she's really present.
That is
so that's not, you know, for her it came naturally, but I think she's of a different age.
No,
but I tell you something, she gave me an interesting, so we talked a little bit about raising children in that same session. It gave me thought. She's, as I say, 84, I'm 54, and I have a 15-year-old. And we talked about what it meant to raise a kid today. And she said, you know, I have no advice for you. And I said, well, what does that mean? And when we were talking about technology and devices, and she said, you know, I was born in 1930 and you were born in 1960. She's very with it. And she said, there are really only 3 or 4 things different between the household I grew up and the household you grew up in. She said, I had a television. It was in the 40s. She said that wasn't the thing. She said, you know, maybe I can think of, we didn't have air conditioning. But there was 2 or 3 things that stood that were different from when she grew up in the 40s, when she was 15, and when I grew up in the mid-70s. She said, the way your kids grow up and the devices they're contending with, it's so different, I can't even begin to understand how you would contend with that. And it was right. This is a generation shift of the likes of which nobody's ever seen.
And my only reason for optimism is that finally, again, all these things really have accelerated in the last year or two.
Yeah.
We are aware of the dangers. If you think of it, up until very recently, there was this kind of euphoria about the internet.
Right.
Despite some of your statements.
I can tell that story too. I'm the guy who said no good has ever come of the internet. Publicly.
There was a bit of an outcry at the Huffington Post, but then he actually took to the Huffington Post and wrote a very thoughtful piece about what he meant. And although you didn't talk about what we're discussing now in terms of what the digital age has done to our ability to be really present,
right,
and really be single-mindedly focused on what we are doing, which is, after all, at the heart of every act of creation.
Yeah.
And that's really what is so troubling, too. That
if you're not present in the act of creation, you really do have a problem.
It's not going to happen. In every act
I know I'm talking in a church, but nonetheless.
Although apparently, speaking of a different kind of act of creation, did you know that 10% of people now are using their smartphones during sex? Did you know that?
No, I did not know that. I don't know what they're using them for. But with that, maybe we should ask some questions from the audience, because I'm sure everybody has some questions for you.
Well, while we're getting some questions, I want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Which is, we were talking earlier about sleep and the importance of sleep.
Yes, I have a huge problem with sleep, always have.
Because I remember we were flying together from Switzerland after a conference one year.
Yeah.
And you saw me on just going to sleep and just sleeping.
I was incredibly envious, jealous even.
And your wife has the same gift.
Yes.
And our culture, I think, for many different reasons, is just now rediscovering sleep. Because for a very long time it was dismissed, especially among men, successful men who bragged, that they don't need a lot of sleep. I had dinner recently with a guy who bragged that he had only gotten 4 hours sleep the night before, and I didn't say it, but I wanted to say, you know what, if you had gotten 5, this dinner would have been more interesting. But now the science is so incontrovertible.
Yeah.
That, sleep helps strengthen our immune system, improve our mental clarity. So in order to try to improve how much sleep you get and how easy it is to fall back asleep, do you have any rituals? Like you said, you don't have your smartphone by your bed.
No, I've suffered for my whole life from bad sleep habits, and I have the misfortune or good fortune, I'm not sure which. The same woman I spoke of before, who I adore, my wife, she puts her head on the pillow at 11. It doesn't come up till I wake her at 7. So that's annoying when you wake up at 3 o'clock. So I do it in 2 ways. One, I do not make the mistake any longer of getting up and out of my bed when I wake up in the middle of the night.
You used to.
I used to. I was a prowler. I would go all through the house, doing all sorts of crazy things, and then wind up back in my bed at 5 o'clock in the morning. The other thing I've realized, though, is I don't sleep consistently through the night, so I take naps.
Yeah.
I close my door of my office, at some point in the afternoon and sleep for 30, 45 minutes.
Great.
And that works pretty well, frankly. Or I'll take a nap just before dinner, and that works out pretty well as well.
Yeah, no, again, and a lot of great people, Winston Churchill, Leonardo da Vinci, JFK.
I'm not putting myself near that, but I find that a nap works pretty well.
And one of our great modern nappers is Charlie Rose, who takes 3 naps a day.
Wow, wow. Okay, maybe I can get myself up to that. I'd have to start at 11 in the morning. I see they're ready with the questions.
Anyone with a question? Come here.
And give us your name and what you do.
Hi everyone. I'm Sona Tatians. I am an attorney. I'm a mother of 2 young girls. I read your book and it was fabulous. And I just told you we discussed it at our women's retreat this weekend. So one thing that I see a lot happening with professional women is how do you say no? Because I have opportunities, new clients, new things happening with my kids, birthday parties and dinners and obligations. And I'm sure you have a lot more opportunities than I do. So how do you say no? How do you feel about saying no? Because a lot of times as a mother or as an attorney, I have so much guilt saying no because I try to do everything and I know I cannot. So in order for me to get my good 8 hours of sleep and be there for my daughters, be there for dinner, take only one night out of the week to do things like this that I enjoy, I need to say no. So I would like to see and hear from you, how do you say no? And how do you feel about saying no?
Well, I love this question because it's a very key question. First of all, especially women, we need to realize that no is a complete sentence. Because we all feel we have to justify it. And secondly, I found that I had to learn to say no to good things, to things that I really wanted to do. Like on book tour, you know, I would be saying in places where I have friends that I don't regularly see. And I would like, you know, to finish my work and then have dinner with them. But then I normally would have to get up really early to do a morning show. So I just would not have dinner with friends. Because the reason why is because I like the way I am when I wake up recharged. And I don't like me when I'm tired and dragging myself through the day. So basically, what I give up is ultimately not as important as what I'm gaining. And when you begin to see that trade-off, it gets easier and easier to say no to good things and just be fully present in your life the next day. So I really think that a good day begins the night before, with the decisions you make about that night, and also having what we're calling them thrive buddies, you know, having somebody who can help us as we are breaking bad habits and starting new habits, having somebody who, let's say at night, you may be just tempted to binge watch House of Cards.
Thank you so much.
And you have your thrive buddy who can actually talk you out of it and tell you take a deep breath, close your laptop and watch it over the weekend. Whatever it may be, there are all these temptations. And then if we keep remembering what it feels like to be recharged, it will be easier to say no.
Hello, my name is Wise, and I'm a sophomore at the University of Southern California. And my question was, how does someone practice self-discipline? Because everything we've spoken about is very based on self-discipline. I'm a student, and I find myself at the beginning of every semester writing down everything that I want to do, like wrapping off 15 minutes before going to sleep, having a book to read. But just 3-4 weeks into the semester, I find myself back into pulling all-nighters, studying for exams. But how do we practice self-discipline?
Which is really what Michael was asking. How do you make this sustainable? And I think that the reason I included 12 steps, you know, at the end of each of the sections, 3 little steps that you can do, is because you can start with one of the steps. Pick one that seems more manageable to you to do in a sustained way. What in the habit literature they call it, what's the keystone habit you want to change, and then it makes it easier to change other habits. For me, my keystone habit was sleep. I went from 4 to 5 hours to 7 to 8 hours. Not immediately. I recommend starting with getting 30 minutes more than you are getting now. And then what happens is that how you feel and the way you experience life changes. And that draws you to do more without the need to always depend on your discipline and your willpower, which is not a very sustainable way. You need to create some other motivations. And for me, the way I felt after I had more sleep was key. And then I started adding meditation and gratitude exercises and also things that involve getting rid of things, like dropping at the end of each day. I like to sort of drop something that no longer serves me. It could be a resentment or a grudge or a project that I'm not really going to do, even though I think I may do it. I mean, like, I recently gave up, for example, ever thinking that I would become a good skier.
You never know.
And it was, no, I do know. It was very liberating. I realized that you can complete a project by dropping it.
It's true.
And now I feel completely at peace. My daughters like skiing. You know, they can ski, and I sit by the fire reading a good book and drinking hot chocolate.
Hi, my name is Elliot Schwartz. I'm an entrepreneur. And my question is, do you have to get to that point in your life where your head just crashes on your desk to realize the importance of what you're saying? Or do you recommend anything now to people so that they don't end up in that situation?
Well, absolutely. You see, I think it's easier sometimes to change through pain, through wake-up calls like mine or worse. But what I'm saying is that, and my hope, and the reason I wrote Thrive, is that we can actually change in ways that don't involve pain, through other people's personal stories, through the science that is absolutely conclusive, that everything we're mentioning here and a lot more actually makes us more effective at what we want to achieve, as well as connecting us with a life that is more meaningful and more purposeful. And also poetry and literature. So for me, these three things: personal stories, scientific findings. I have 55 pages of endnotes because I wanted to convince even the most stubborn skeptic. In fact, I've been a sleep evangelist, for example, for so long that the Harvard School of Medicine asked me to join the board of their sleep division.
I will never get asked to that board.
Michael is on the board of Harvard, so and every major university now, Harvard, Stanford, are doing incredible work on sleep and the importance of sleep, what kind of a miracle drug it is in our life. So absolutely, I think we can wake up without the painful wake-up call.
Hi, I'm Sakshi Talwar, and I have my own e-commerce venture. So my question is that what was the biggest obstacle you had faced when you were first starting off your business, and how did you overcome that hardship? If you could just cite an example.
Well, so I co-founded the Huffington Post with a good friend of Michael's, Kenny Lair.
Yeah.
And the Huffington Post will be 9 years old this Friday.
Wow.
And I remember the first day we launched the Huffington Post, May 9th, yes, May 9th, 2009, yeah. And the reviews were terrible. I remember one of them by heart. It said, "The Huffington Post is an unsurvivable failure. It is the movie equivalent of Gigli, Ishtar, and Heaven's Gate all wrong."
That publication is out of business.
Yes, you remember?
It was probably in Newsweek.
Well, the author of this piece, actually a year later, emailed me and said, "I was wrong. The Huffington Post has become an indispensable part of the internet, and I would like to write for you." And
wow.
And I said, great, because I think the worst thing you can do is hold grudges. As Carrie Fisher said, I quote her in the book, resentment is the poison you drink thinking the other person is going to die. So I think my point here is that when you start anything, there are going to be naysayers, there are going to be obstacles. The important thing is not to feel entitled. I like what you said, not to feel that I have this great idea, the world must immediately embrace it, and how dare they throw obstacles my way. If you approach it that way, then every day would be miserable, because every day is full of obstacles, not just when you start something, but even after you succeed. I mean, there are many things that happened today that had to do with the Huffington Post that I wish hadn't happened, that I had to deal with, I'm sure in your business too.
Every minute.
Every minute. So what has changed for me is my attitude to these things happening. It's like I deal with it, and actually the serenity prayer is perfect here. I change the things I can change. I accept the things I cannot change, and I pray for wisdom to know the difference. This prayer is just so full of wisdom, because really it's a roadmap for dealing with business, with children, with everything.
Hello, my name is Paul Kane. I'm a healthcare executive, and I have a simple question for you. You're both very impressive and very successful people who are entirely intelligent, so I guess, how do you stay humble? What keeps you leveled out?
Well, Michael, you should take that question, because you are, I was just reading a piece actually about Michael, which celebrates the fact that he's remained so humble in the middle of all the success and all the pressures in Hollywood to not be humble. So how do you do it?
Well, a couple of things. I think one is I have 3 teenage daughters and my wife, but who make sure that I'm reminded every day that but 2 other factors. First of all, I grew up in Holland, in the Netherlands, and the thing about Holland is everybody lives very close to one another, and everybody is taught to live a very modest life, because in order to live in that close proximity, it means that nobody, including the Queen, frankly, of Holland, can't sort of stand out, because that will only breed resentment. And I was raised with that, and that was very helpful. And the other is what I was saying, which I really firmly believe in, which I was saying to Arianna earlier. I'm a big believer in luck. And I think once you give yourself over to the notion that, of course, you can put yourself in harm's way or in luck's way, but once you give yourself over to the notion that you are where you are, and I think most people are where they are, in large part because of luck, then you no longer feel like, oh, I'm entitled to this, or I did this because I was so clever, or I did this because there was somebody who, or some person who smiled on me, and I therefore owe it to the world to make sure that I smile on them and help other people out. And I really believe in that. I really believe in that.
Hello, my name is Carissa Shaw, and I'm a CEO. So Arianna, I'm so impressed with you and your business and your wisdom, and I wanted to know the process and how you wrote Thrive.
So how I wrote Thrive, in fact, the reason I didn't want to write Thrive, which is my 14th book, is because for every other book, I just pulled all-nighters, I stressed, I just found it harder to practice everything I'm saying, because the book loomed large in the middle of everything else I had to do, especially with the 2 previous books I wrote while running the Huffington Post. This time it was very different. It was really a completely joyful experience. Partly because I had, over the last 7 years since my my wake-up call, I had really delved into the science of well-being and the science of how can we live the good life. And I've always loved reading philosophy anyway. I just read more. And so I had an enormous amount of material already. So in a sense, the research was done in an organic way. And it was a question of piecing it together and working on the structure. And I found that I just really dictated everything as a first draft. I realized that one of the things that I love more than anything is speaking. I mean, having a live audience and speaking is still my favorite form of communication. There's nothing quite like it. The reason why I still prefer plays to movies. And so I thought I would just dictate it. I would often dictate it to an assistant or an editor I work with, or I would just dictate it into a machine. And then, once I had a first draft, it was so much easier to edit that. And I would just speak. And so, if you've read it or when you read it, you'll see that it has that more conversational tone. Because I wanted to talk to people from my heart and from my own experience and also sometimes I talk a little bit like I have a legal brief to convince people by throwing a lot of research and science at them. And I had my editor, in fact, had me cut some of the science because there was so much, because it's so amazing, the scientific findings that are coming out now from so many universities about giving, for example, being a shortcut to happiness, or improving our health, all these things that spiritual teachers had written about or spoken about are now verified by science. So that was why this was a very different journey.
Hi, Arianna. I'm Anne-Marie Knudsen. I just wanted to ask, what have you learned over the course of time to delegate that you found has been crucial to your success and thriving?
To delegate. Why don't you take that? You have to delegate more than I have.
Sorry, the question is, what have I found about it?
What are some of the most crucial things that you delegate that allow you to have the time to do what you need to do?
Gosh, that's an interesting question. I think in the job that I have at the moment, most of the day-to-day matters are delegation. It's not about delegation, quite frankly. It's about not second-guessing. And that's as true in my own household as it is in my workplace. And the household is a better example of it, because the minute you say to somebody, I would love it if you did this, and if you at all look in on what they're doing, that completely voids the whole notion that you've given them the authority to do it. And I know it with my kids, I know it with my wife, I know it to be the case. That's not to say that after the fact you can't have a conversation about how they did it, or whether you thought they did it according to the way you thought it should be done. And by my house meaning delegation, I'm not suggesting I'm the one who's in charge. Frankly, I'm the guy who's way down on the totem pole. But on the few occasions when I do have the moment when I can say to somebody, "Would you do this?" I find it always very important that you, at that point in time, don't look over their shoulder. And that's really an impulse that everyone has, and that's something to be avoided.
Hello, my name is Bumi. Arianna, thank you so much for your message and your book. I definitely identify with your message because after years in the corporate world with a high-powered job as an architect, I experienced severe anxiety a couple of years ago. But also, I have a daughter who's a teenager, and as much as your book speaks to us women about prioritizing and not putting so much of our emphasis on money and power, I wondered if you had thought of writing a book for teenagers or young adults with your daughter, because they stress out about totally different issues, which are also as valid.
Absolutely. And in a way, Thrive has been written for young people, millennials, college kids. I've done and continue to do a college tour because I feel that's a generation I really very much want to reach. You're absolutely right. I mean, it is amazing what an epidemic of stress we have among millennials. It is known as the stress generation. And we see, binge drinking, an epidemic of legal and illegal drug addiction, mental health problems in colleges everywhere. It is truly serious, another thing we're paying enough attention. And I think part of it is that we have not given enough keys to our children to deal with all that. We were talking earlier with Stephanie, who's here from San Francisco, about how we need a soul academy as well as a Khan academy. It's like you see how, parents worry about every little thing, what our kids are eating, is the food organic, are they wearing their seat belt? But we haven't really armed them enough with what they need to navigate their own emotions and their own fears and stresses. And we need to change that. A lot of people abandoned religion but did not replace it. And philosophy, after Spinoza, was reduced really to deconstructionism and linguistics and abandoned all the big questions. So I feel we have a lot of work to do in that arena, but one of the things we are doing, the Huffington Post, for example, is doing oases in certain colleges during finals. We just finished one at the University of Miami, where we kind of provide them with an environment where they can go and have yoga and massages and lie on hammocks and just take some time to recharge before they pull those all-nighters, which should not be necessary and which actually make people less effective at passing exams. And what is fascinating is that at the White House Correspondents' Dinner on Saturday, we had a mixture of guests, like everybody invites lots of different people to their tables, every media company. And I had on my left-hand side Richard Sherman from the Seattle Seahawks talking to me about more and more teams and athletes are incorporating these practices into their coaching because it makes them better in the field and on the court. So he actually works with sleep experts to be able to sleep more deeply. I should connect you with him. They're practicing yoga, meditation, etc. On my other side, I had Sylvia Bruel, who is the OMB head at the White House, who is going through confirmation tomorrow to become the next HHS secretary. And she was telling me how she thinks ultimately for tonight it will be more important for her to get a good night's sleep than another 2 hours of prep. Because when you're going through a tough thing, whether it's a confirmation hearing or a final exam, you need to be able to retrieve all that you know. And very often, if you've spent 2 more hours cramming, but you're exhausted, you won't be able to retrieve it so easily. So this is the kind of stuff that's both practical and soulful, ultimately, that we need to teach teenagers, millennials, and give them little practical tools that they can use. And that's why I filled Thrive with practical tools. And we're doing a big outreach this month because of graduation.
I'm Sam Botta. I have been in a traumatic brain injury recovery program for the past 4 months with 7 hours of speech therapy. And part of what we've been doing has included music. And I'm fascinated at how you're presenting this simplicity, because I was forced to go from high-profile career to having to learn to do little things like walk and talk normally again. And I'm thankful to be doing those things again. But I find it beautiful that your book is expressing the exact things that this place where I've been at for the past 4 months, Center for Neuroskills, is saying to do. They're using music, and they're making my brain be retrained through simple things like what you're saying. So what is this music that you're talking about? I read somewhere that you like country music.
Yes. I love country music, and I'm glad you brought up music, because music has been incredibly important to me. I think it's important to all of us, but I constantly play music when I'm traveling, when I'm writing, or when I want to pick me up. I mean, when I want to tap into the joy in me. I have certain songs that I can go to. So again, having all that ready, it's great. I mean, having your little iPod with certain songs, certain pieces of music that really resonate with you is another really great tool to use. We have many tools in our toolbox. We just need to prioritize both filling our toolbox, having it ready for those difficult times, those challenging times, and then knowing how to go to the toolbox and what tool do we get out of it.
And our final question for the evening.
My name is Victoria Gold. I graduated from Indiana University a year ago, actually this Saturday, and I currently work in public relations. And my question to you is, since graduating, my struggle has been finding a balance, first of all, between professional life, social life, and personal life, and kind of deciding what the most important thing is and not feeling guilty about giving the other thing up. And my question to you is, how do you decide what the most important thing is at that point in time? Because there's, from all different media outlets, from social media and the outside world, there's constant, people telling you, you need to focus on your career and you need to focus on your relationships and stuff like that. So how do you kind of make that decision to what is the most important thing, what you should be focusing your energy on?
So I would say by trusting yourself. Trusting yourself. We've become so much more either directed than ever before. The efforts on social media, on how many likes our picture of our salad got. You see now, so much of social media has become like an effort at one-upping, our friends. So recognizing that there is that place in us where we have all the wisdom and all the answers, and then having a little tribe of people we trust to get their opinion rather than the indiscriminate noise that's coming at us about what we value, which is totally real, what you said. And also being willing not to get it right the first time. If you think this is really important and you focus on that, whatever that may be, and then a week later or a day later you say, hey, that isn't really what I want to focus on, you change. It's like, I think finding your passion has become another thing that students are anxious about now. I remember one of my daughters saying to me, Mommy, I haven't found my passion yet. Like this was like a deadline. And she had to find her passion. I said, I wouldn't worry about that. I mean, if I look back at my life, it was such a crazy series of things that didn't really make sense, that one would lead to the other, that we should accept that life is full of sort of serendipity and unexpected turns, and all that matters is being awake for it and really being present for it. Our mother used to say, don't miss the moment. And another favorite thing that she used to say is whenever we would be upset or anxious or whatever, she would say, change the channel, darling. You're in control of the clicker. Just stop playing that scary movie. because often our minds don't make a distinction between what is real, what is actually happening, and what we fear may happen. And Montaigne, the French philosopher, said that there were many terrible things in my life, but most of them never happened. So keeping all that in mind, and I'm glad you're laughing, because I think humor is also just a great way not to take ourselves too seriously and roll with the punches and not have that sense of entitlement that Michael talked about, that makes us feel we have to do it all perfectly, and everybody should realize how perfectly we're already doing it and line up with us.
I will say my mother in that same session said, you know, you work too hard. By the time you're my age, trust me, you're never going to regret that hour you didn't spend in the office. She had a point.
Well, actually, before we end, I want to thank you very much for taking time away from the office to be here with us.
It was a pleasure. It wasn't from the office,
because
it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me. To you.